and welcome to today's lecture on Clytemnestra. I'm your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we are going to talk about the wife of King Agamemnon. Now, Clytemnestra murders her husband, but let's just say this might have been warranted. After all, he does kill their daughter, sail away to go fight in a war for 10 years, and then come back with another woman. And with all these injustices, things don't seem to work out too well for him. So whether you want to bring down the house of Atreus, or are just looking for a little justice, journey with me as we investigate Clytemnestra, the Kingslayer.
Our heroine for this lecture, Clytemnestra, is long known in mythology as the wife of King Agamemnon of Mycenae. But as we'll see, being a queen doesn't mean that you're always subservient to your husband. The story of Clytemnestra has been told as part of numerous myths throughout antiquity, but it's her treatment in a trilogy of plays by the Greek playwright Aeschylus that best tells the tragic tale of the Queen of Mycenae.
Now, Aeschylus is our oldest surviving Greek tragedy playwright, and he lived and worked between about 525 BCE and about 450 BCE. But understanding the early days of drama and tragedy, it's not that straightforward. It's often difficult to tell kind of what was already in place when Aeschylus started working and what new contributions he brought to the world of Greek drama and tragedy.
One of Aeschylus's new traits was the introduction of conflict. Scholars believe that prior to him, actors only interacted with the chorus. But this conflict didn't take much time to really get rolling. Once it was introduced, it got bloody awfully quickly. He was also the first tragedian to present a play as a trilogy. And his Oresteia trilogy, the one that most thoroughly covers Clytemnestra, stands as his most famous set of plays today.
But Aeschylus wasn't just a tragedy playwright either. He was a soldier too, and he actually fought at the Battle of Salamis and the Battle of Plataea, two of the turning points in the Greek war against the Persians. And not only that, he was also inducted into the Eleusinian Mysteries. Quite the Renaissance man, if you ask me.
While the first play of the Oresteia trilogy might be called Agamemnon, it's much more about his wife and our heroine, Clytemnestra. The play is set at the end of the Trojan War, and after 10 long years, Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and Argos, is finally coming home. But this isn't necessarily a joyous occasion, and a couple of issues are at play that make this a not-so-perfect reunion between husband and wife.
So first, in order to leave for Troy, he sacrifices his daughter Iphigenia. And he does this in order to get friendly winds so the Greek fleet can sail eastward across the Aegean to get to Troy. Second, he's gone for 10 dang years. That's an awfully long time. And third, when he comes back, he brings another lady with him, Cassandra. Now he calls this a prize for more, but I think it's probably a honey on the side. And all this combines to make one awfully unhappy queen.
Now, Clytemnestra hasn't been perfect either. In the absence of her husband, she started an affair with her cousin, Aeschylus. And Aeschylus has his own reasons for wanting to kill Agamemnon. Mainly because Agamemnon's dad forced Aeschylus' dad to eat 2 of his own sons. Pretty gruesome stuff here. But when Agamemnon returns home, none of this malice is on display. The king is welcomed, and celebrations and sacrifices ensue.
So it just so turns out that Agamemnon's prize, Cassandra, has the gift of prophecy. She can see the future, so she knows this is all going to go horribly wrong. but she's also got a curse that no one ever believes her. And so when Agamemnon's taking a bath, just relaxing a little bit after returning from the war, Clytemnestra sneaks in and stabs him and Cassandra to death. Now, does that sound heroic? Well, I guess it kind of really all depends on what perspective you look at this from.
The second play in the Oresteia trilogy, The Libation Bearers, picks up years after the death of Agamemnon. The focus now moves away, at least in part, from Clytemnestra to focus on the children that she bore with Agamemnon, her son Orestes and her daughter Electra. The two children meet at the grave of their father, bringing libations to help put the soul of Agamemnon to rest, and hopefully stop the terrible dreams of their mother Clytemnestra. At this meeting, and with the orders from Apollo, they devise a plan to kill both their mom and Aeschylus, her lover.
Now, like so many ancient Greek plays, the Libation Bearers revolves around this idea of deception. Now, Orestes knows that he's not going to be welcomed back into the palace. Instead of going in and proclaiming who he is, he dresses up like kind of a poor regular messenger. And he shows up, and as a messenger, he tells Clytemnestra, his mom, who doesn't recognize him because it's been so long, that Orestes, her son, is in fact dead.
Clytemnestra sends for her lover Aeschylus to tell him the news of Orestes' death. But as Aeschylus enters the palace, alone and without bodyguards, Orestes reveals himself and slays Aeschylus, taking vengeance, at least in part, for the death of his father. Orestes' mom, Clytemnestra, then enters the room, and at first Orestes hesitates. He then strikes the death blow to his own mother, bringing Apollo's orders to completion and securing vengeance for his father.
Now, after killing his mom, Orestes is haunted by the Furies, and he flees the palace trying to get away from them. And he goes far and wide, but as we'll see, there's no escaping the Furies.
The final part of the Oresteia trilogy is known as the Eumenides, a euphemism for the Furies, originally called the Erinyes in ancient Greek mythology. And I say euphemism because it literally translates as the gracious ones, a rather nice way of calling a group of divinities that are meant to relentlessly hound and torture you. And in the Eumenides play, we see an interesting move away from vigilante justice and towards social order and a proper judicial system.
So the Eumenides begins with Orestes being haunted by the Furies. And after fleeing far and wide, he eventually begs Apollo to help him, and Apollo does, allowing him to flee to Athens and ask Athena for help. And there Athena does help him, but it turns out she does so in an awfully weird way.
Rather than protect Orestes from the Furies or hide him away from their sight, she sets up the very first legal trial. 12 Athenian citizens will judge Orestes' deeds to determine whether he should die for the murder of his mother. As it turns out, the 12 jurists split evenly, 6-6. And the deciding vote comes down to Athena herself, and she declares that Orestes was right in seeking vengeance, and that his life should be spared.
Now the Furies are pretty upset about this, but Athena just tells them to chill out. No more retaliating against people who have wronged you. Instead, all disputes will now be settled in the courts. No more vigilante justice. And so in a weird way, by killing his own mom, Orestes has helped set up the first law court in ancient Greece.
The story of the Oresteia trilogy is a pretty gruesome one. Wife kills husband, son kills mother. These aren't just murders, they are the murders of one's own family. As a result, one of the major themes of these plays deals with the endless cycle of blood crimes. Once the first one is committed, it is very easy for that to lead to a vicious cycle of death death, and more death. And with Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, this goes all the way back to before the trilogy starts, with Agamemnon's father forcing Aeschylus' father to eat his own children.
And yet these stories just aren't all about death. In fact, they're about these times when you get into situations where all your choices are really crappy, right? So Agamemnon's gotta go to Troy, but the only way he can get there is by killing his own daughter to get the winds in his favor. And Clytemnestra, well, she's gotta deal with this awfully crappy marriage, either putting up with it or putting an end to it. And Orestes, he's gotta deal with the fact that, well, his mom has killed his dad. Either live with it or do something about it. And so even though this seems about bloodshed all the time, in addition to that, it's also about how do you make choices when all the choices are bad.
In some ways, this trilogy is also a history, detailing the development of a new social and judicial system in Greece. It suggests that in the early days, blood vengeance and personal retribution was a normal way of pursuing justice. But now the old gods, the Furies, have been replaced with the new ones, the gracious ones, and thus the development of the mythical history of the first law courts in Athens.
But what do we make of Clytemnestra herself? Right? On the one hand, she kills her husband. On the other hand, he wasn't treating her very well. Then she herself is killed by her own son, who's then acquitted of her murder. When we look at this story, it's interesting to do so in comparison to Euripides' Medea, who, after committing her murders, she gets away scot-free. And this makes us kind of think that Aeschylus might have not been quite as much of a feminist as Euripides. Now Clytemnestra, like so many Greek women, is in this super difficult spot where she's in a terrible marriage and she's either got to do something about it or put up with it. And Clytemnestra takes justice into her own hands, but then she herself is the recipient of the exact same fate. But the result of all of this is kind of interesting. It's a new judicial system, one based on the court of law. And the legacy of that lasts for hundreds of years in ancient Greece and thousands of years into the modern world. Just a couple lessons you can learn from
Clytemnestra, the Kingslayer.